The freezing Moravian dawn holds its breath over a valley that will swallow an empire whole. Napoleon Bonaparte watches from the heights. The Battle of Austerlitz, 1805, the most perfect trap in the Napoleonic Wars. The muffled rustle of damp woolen uniforms fills the dense fog. The entire conflict turns on a desperate gamble. The forced march of Davout's Third Corps, racing toward a trap even Napoleon's marshals do not yet understand. Beneath this stillness, the Holy Roman Empire, 1,000 years of European history, ends today. Not a single man in the valley knows it. 3 emperors stare across a continent trembling on the edge of annihilation. The War of the Third Coalition ignites as ancient monarchies unite to crush the upstart French Empire. The decisive chapter in European military history. The Allied coalition, backed by the Russian Empire and the Austrian Empire, wields a crushing numerical superiority of nearly 90,000 men and holds the dominant high ground. To counter this force, a dense column of blue-coated French infantry marches along a muddy Bavarian road under a grey autumn sky. This relentless advance triggers a rapid operational shift that completely outpaces the traditional Austrian defensive networks. The Austrian High Command blunders into disaster by attempting an isolated campaign in Bavaria before their allies arrive. Napoleon stands on Juran Hill, deciding to unleash Soult's attack columns up the Pratzen Heights. His gaze fixes on the distant lines as brass-rimmed shakos glisten with persistent drizzle in the flat morning light. He believes that his deliberately weakened right flank can withstand a massive onslaught long enough for his central thrust to destroy the enemy army. This bold gamble places the entire weight of his empire on a single, fragile axis. Deep within the Allied headquarters, aristocratic arrogance dictates the movements of 90,000 men. Major General Franz von Weyrother reads his pedantic battle plans to a sleeping war council on the eve of the battle. In the valley below, the flickering orange glow of tens of thousands of straw torches held high on pine poles by French soldiers illuminates the fog. Napoleon possesses a peerless ability to fuse rapid strategic maneuvering with deep psychological manipulation of his opposing commanders. The Allied staff misreads this fiery display entirely. Weyrother believes Napoleon is on the verge of a panicked retreat. He is completely wrong. The Austrian strategist calculates for a weak opponent, assuming that a massive left hook maneuver will easily sever the French line from Vienna. High above the valley, lines of fire dancing in the valley below convince the Allied sentries that the French are burning their camps. This fatal assumption blinds the coalition leadership to the hidden trap waiting at the base of the plateau. The momentum shifts irreversibly as the young Tsar demands immediate glory over the cautious objections of his veterans. Tsar Alexander I overrules Kutuzov's desperate pleas to wait for reinforcements and orders the immediate descent of the Allied columns from the heights. Through the clearing mist, the choking white smoke of black powder musket volleys rises from the frozen reeds of the Goldbach stream. The massive Allied left wing surges downward, abandoning the dominant plateau to chase an illusion of swift victory. The physical reality of the Moravian landscape now becomes a brutal crucible for the attacking forces. The Allied columns plunge into the marshy agricultural lowlands, targeting the thin French right flank with overwhelming numbers. Near the southern villages, the mud-splattered white coats of the Austrian advance guard press through the frozen drainage ditches under a heavy barrage. The terrain compresses the massed regiments, slowing their deployment into effective fighting lines. This geometric bottleneck compromises the speed of the entire Allied offensive. Both sides freeze for a final, breathless moment before the main lines collide in the freezing mud. Davout's 6,600 men of the Third Corps face over 30,000, attacking Austro-Russians across a 3-mile front. Behind stone walls, orchard fences, and frozen drainage ditches, the exhausted French veterans dress their ranks after their grueling forced march. The thin blue line holds its fire as the massive white columns approach. This disciplined silence amplifies the dread hanging over the valley. The first exchange of massed musketry transforms the southern villages into an absolute charnel house. Outnumbered 4-1, the French defenders contest every house and barn before the weight of numbers forces a retreat. In the narrow streets, the air fills with the screams of the wounded and the roar of exploding shells. The original plan faces a critical crisis when the Russian Imperial Guard launches a devastating counterattack on the heights, temporarily driving back Soult's leading divisions. The entire conflict reaches the point of no return as the Emperor risks his ultimate reserve to restore the center. General Rapp unleashes the elite guard cavalry and Mameluks in a full gallop charge directly into the surging ranks of the enemy. On the blood-soaked plateau, horses kicking up chunks of half-frozen turf collide with the Russian Chivalry Guard. The Battle of Austerlitz 1805 hangs in the balance as the cavalry commitment ignites under maximum pressure. The ultimate outcome remains hidden in the smoke. The mechanism of the French counterstroke reveals itself in disciplined, rhythmic volleys of lead across the high ground. Soult's infantry successfully repels the Russian counterattacks and secures the crest of the Pratzen Heights. Facing the fractured Allied center, a solid tactical square of French infantry stands firm, bayonets leveled outward like the quills of a defensive beast. This steadfast positioning splits the Allied army into two isolated halves, executing Napoleon's grand design with mathematical precision. The coalition command structure disintegrates rapidly. The struggle intensifies further north as elite Russian regiments shatter against the unyielding French defensive formations. Prince Bagration's flank assault, his final gamble to rescue the collapsing center, stalls against the combined weight of coordinated infantry and heavy cavalry reserves. Through the swirling fog, Russian heavy cavalry charges with raised sabers that will never find their target. The French cuirassiers countercharge with thunderous momentum, checking the northern advance completely. This brutal collision seals the fate of the Allied center. No reinforcements will reach the plateau in time. The tactical geometry of the field changes completely as the French Emperor exploits his hard-won breakthrough on the heights. Napoleon, recognizing the Allied left wing is completely cut off, orders his center to pivot south to envelop Buxhouden's retreating columns. Across the plateau, vicious Egyptian horsemen, wielding curved scimitars, hunt down the fleeing remnants of the Imperial Guard. The French commanders coordinate this massive encirclement under intense pressure, refusing to grant the enemy any avenue of escape. The trap snaps shut completely. The final remnants of Weyrother's fatal assumption shatter against the harsh reality of total tactical encirclement. The massive Allied left wing panics as French divisions descend upon their rear from the captured heights. Above the shallow valley, the frozen Satchen fish pond ice breaking under French artillery bombardment creates a horrific barrier to the fleeing troops. A battery of 24 heavy French guns relentlessly smashes the frozen surface into floating sheets. This devastating bombardment removes the last hope of an orderly coalition retreat. Thousands of panicked soldiers scramble across the cracking winter ice as the southern valley turns into a trap. The retreat degenerates into a chaotic rout under the steady roar of the French batteries. In the frozen ponds, floating ice sheets churning in the shallow, muddy waters swallow heavy artillery teams and horses. The psychological shock of the bombardment forces a total collapse of discipline among the retreating columns. The entire Allied wing shatters under this relentless pressure. The field goes quiet as the magnitude of the French triumph becomes mathematically indisputable by late afternoon. The combined Austro-Russian army has ceased to exist as a cohesive fighting force, losing 27,000 casualties and almost all artillery. Along the escape routes, thousands of abandoned muskets and shattered ammunition wagons lining the muddy paths mark the destruction of the Third Coalition. The remaining coalition forces flee eastward in complete military and psychological disarray. Within days, the shockwaves of this single afternoon obliterate a political order that has governed Europe for a millennium. Emperor Francis II, recognizing that his empire has been severed in two, sues for peace and prepares to bend the knee. In the quiet halls of Vienna, the massive, jewel-encrusted bronze crown of the Holy Roman Empire rests silently on a red velvet cushion for the very last time. 1,000 years of imperial continuity end not with a siege or a rebellion, but with the signature of a defeated emperor and the echo of French cannon still ringing in his ears. How did an entire coalition of kings fall so completely for a single psychological trap? Tsar Alexander's pride, inflamed by arrogant young aristocrats who viewed the French revolutionary veterans with unearned disdain, overruled every voice of caution at the Battle of Austerlitz. In the deserted palace, the dying embers of a hearth illuminating the empty throne room reflect a shattered old order that cannot comprehend what has just destroyed it. Napoleon has not merely won a battle. He has demonstrated that the era of crowned heads deciding the fate of nations is over. The Treaty of Pressburg dismantles centuries of Austrian influence across the German states with a single stroke of the pen. German princes, formally signing secession documents under a French imperial seal, finalize the destruction of the old regime. Emperor Francis II abdicates his imperial throne, formally dissolving the Holy Roman Empire. The political body that crowned Charlemagne launched the Crusades and defined Christendom itself. The defeated Russian forces retreat into Hungary to rebuild their shattered regiments. This triumph forces the French Empire into a direct confrontation with a terrified Prussia during the next winter campaign. The road from Austerlitz runs directly to the twin battlefields of Jena and Auerstedt, where the Grande Armée will face the legendary Prussian army. Subscribe to stay with this cinematic series, as the next campaign is already in production. If you are watching on a television screen, use the QR code now to subscribe directly on your phone.